Okay, I think we can start now. People are starting to arrive. So thank you again for joining this webinar this morning. So just to remind you that this webinar is organized within the framework of the Connect-EO Space to Waves European project. And today we have David Antoine from the Curtin University of Perth, which is he's part of the School of Earth and Planetary Sciences and the Remote Sensing and Satellite Research Group. The presentation has been made in collaboration with Brandon McCarthy, which is the Industry Engagement Manager at Frontier SI Australia, who is also the Connect-EO Front Office Australia contact for the Connect-EO project. So next slide, please. So just to give you a few guidelines for the webinar. So as you can see, we turn off all microphones. So if you have any question, please use the chat box, and we will open your microphone so that you can ask your question or simply read your question out loud. So just for your information, the presentation and the webinar recording will be available on the Connect-EO and Space2Way websites in case you want to rewatch the replay of the webinar. And if you have any question after the webinar or during the webinar, you can write us at contact@connecteo.eu if you have any inquiries or if you require more information about the projects and these activities. Next slide, please. So just to give you a few heads up about the two projects, I know that most of you know them, but just to give you a few headlines about that. So starting with the Connect-EO project, it has been funded by the COSME-GO International Program and started in September 2020 and will end this August. So we have a consortium of 3 partners. So the project is led by ERSC, which is the European Agency for Remote Sensing companies based in Belgium. We also have Pôle Mer Atlantique from France, a maritime innovation cluster, and CTA for Spain. And our main objective is to focus on the use of EU addressing business opportunities and key socioeconomic environmental challenges in the maritime and agriculture sectors. So to give you a very quick overview of the project, so the Connect-EO project is built on a previous European funded project called IDEO. Our main objective is to promote access to Chile and Australia markets for European EU SME services and products active in maritime and agriculture sectors. And we build on a local existing network to facilitate successful partnerships for our selected SMEs. So the main 3 objectives and expectation for the project, we have first what we call a virtual back office, which will help our SMEs to exploit target markets by providing target market intelligence, documentation, reports, and so on, linked to the 2 markets that we focus on, which are Australia and Chile, and to give relevant background information and funding opportunities to our SMEs. We also started a front office in Australia in January, which is led by Brandon, that I mentioned earlier, which aims at improving and validating the value of continuous reports with potential partners in Australia. And we are also organizing online training missions to facilitate development of strong international B2B linkage with partners in the target countries in both maritime and agriculture sectors. So to present you the second project, which is organizing this webinar, which is Space to Waves. So the general objective of the project, just like Connect-EO, is to promote access to international markets for 30 European SMEs involved in the development or provision of Earth observation products and services in support of blue growth sectors. So you have the 6 concept sectors here, which are fisheries, aquaculture, maritime transport, port infrastructure, maritime surveillance, and climate change. And their consortium is composed of 6 European clusters, Pôle Mer Méditerranée, Aerospace Valley, Coralia, MSC, DTA, and Forum Oceano. So Connect-EO has 2 target markets, and SpaceWave have 4. So you have the 4 that you have here. You have Canada, South Africa, Australia, and United Arab Emirates. And just to give you a very quick update of their international program, so the Space 2 Waves project divided their program into 4 pillars. You have the participation in tailored workshops, so they dedicate 3 hours of online workshops on the topics that are listed here. They plan business mission in the 4 selected countries. They have individual consulting on specific needs, and a monitoring phase. And I will now give the floor to David for his observation on the Earth observation panorama in Australia. David, the floor is yours.
Yep. Thank you, Nolwenn. Thank you, Juliana, for the invitation to this webinar. And well, good morning, everyone. I don't see you, but hope everything is well. So I'm going to go through a few things about what's happening in this country, Australia, in terms of Earth observation and applications of this to the marine domain. So next slide. So the content is quite simple. So there will be a short reminder about what are the possible applications of Earth observation to the maritime domain. Then some numbers about the maritime economy in Australia, and then some key aspects about what's happening at the moment in this arena in the country, and how things get progressively organized. So this slide is maybe a bit outdated because I took this from the Copernicus some time ago. The Copernicus program that I think most of you know, but in case not, Copernicus is a program of the European Commission, and which includes a space component, which is made of these Sentinel missions, so Sentinel 1, 2, 3, etc. And this space component is supposed to provide the Earth observation for Europe and the world, actually, on the long term. And that's one of the first things I wanted to emphasize here, is this Copernicus program is the attempt that Europe has made to move away from the situation we had 10, 15, 20 years ago with Earth observation, which was essentially relying on science missions with a finite lifetime, to a system which is supposed to be operational and to be there for the next decades. And it's not just nice because it's meaning more data, but it's nice for everything which is an application or a service to be developed, because there is some guarantee that this data will be there for the next decade, at least. I cannot, of course, always know what's going to happen in the next decades, but at least that's the promise of this program. So it's a completely new paradigm in terms of how these data sets can be channeled to applications and services. And the domains which are indicated in this little square box in this slide, as you can see, many of them cover the maritime environment. So fisheries, as you can see here, everything about biodiversity, environment protection, climate and energy, transport and safety, public health, tourism, all these domains have some connection to the maritime domain. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've just taken two simple examples from the Copernicus program of applications using a range of Earth observation products plus models. And the one on the left is a real-time satellite detection and drift forecast for this sargassum algae in the equatorial Atlantic. So these sargassum are very big floating algae, and they were quite, episodical before, but they apparently become a real problem for navigation. Their extent has increased a lot. So there was an interest from the hazard point of view and from the navigation point of view to have some forecast and observation about where they are. It's probably not such a big deal for the very large vessels, but for relatively smaller size vessel or even for sailboats, it can be really, really a big issue if you end up in this very large floating algae. And the example on the right is on a different arena. It's about energy. It's to having a program to try to find the best deployment sites for a combined floating wind and wave energy system. So, when you deploy something at sea with a given application in mind, you, of course, want to find a site which has the environment characteristic you need. And that's where the Earth observation, again, coupled with models, can be extremely useful to do this. So just for example, there are tens of them, at the moment, maybe probably 100 of them happening with thanks to this Copernicus program. Next slide. Okay, so that was just a very quick reminder. So in terms of the maritime industry in Australia, that's definitely a growing industry. We now collectively, as you know, name this as the blue economy. And the latest reports on what the economic output of this marine industry is in Australia have estimated a contribution around 80 billions of Australian dollars in 2017-18. And for the record, the euro is 1.5 Australian dollars. So you can divide this by 1.5, you have the number in euros. The reference for this number is coming from this AIMS index of marine industry in 2020. AIMS is the Australian Institute of Marine Science. Next slide. Okay, there you have a bit more details on what this maritime industry is in Australia. So you have all this a list of these different domains. So aquaculture here, fisheries, oil and gas exploration and exploitation, which is of course a big thing for Australia, shipbuilding, boat building, etc., and the tourism. So basically, next slide. Oh, there is a little thing, yeah. So the highest value in terms of millions of dollars is of course in the offshore resource with oil and gas. It's something that is not, well, it's roughly known, I think, from Europe, but actually before I moved to Australia some years ago now, I didn't realize how important this sector was for this country. It's really a huge, huge part of the national economy. Tourism is the second largest activity, and then you have this other fisheries and aquaculture in particular. Next slide. And these are just a few examples of what these different domains try to do at the moment, what their outlook is, and then what the sort of opportunities might be to develop activity. So the oil and gas, they are, as usual, as with many industries, trying to reduce cost to maintain their margin in what was until recently a weaker oil and gas price environment. Of course, this is a quickly changing environment, as we all know at the moment. They have as well some strategic commitment and goals towards decarbonization. So that's a big push on this industry to become a bit more neutral if possible. There is a lot of infrastructure development as well. In particular, Australia is wanting to become a major global exporter for hydrogen. Offshore engineering, shipping and renewable energy is as well a big activity. Fisheries and aquaculture are in development as well significantly. So now, next slide, please. We can move on to a few Okay, so that's when I'm going to start to show you a bit how the things are organized in this country when it comes to Earth observation and the use of Earth observation for developing applications. So one of the main things that has happened in the last few years, that was actually in 2018, so it's nearly 4 years ago now, is that Australia has created a space agency. So in the 1970s, basically, Australia made a decision not to invest significantly in the space domain. At that time, the idea was, okay, there is largely enough from the US, from Europe, and let's use what these countries produce in terms of Earth observation, in terms of launch capabilities. So that was a political decision, and in the last decade, that has been progressively revisited, and the country decided that this complete reliance on foreign entities, foreign agencies, for everything connected to Earth observation, and actually everything connected to space, was probably becoming a bit of a problem. So one of the things the country decided to do was to create this space agency. Now, as you probably know, every country is giving a specific mandate to their space agencies. And the one in Australia is very clear. The mandate is to develop the space industry and to create jobs in that space. This is not an agency funding research, for instance. Research is funded, by other agencies, other means. That's really a mandate to developing the economy around space. And that's what, is roughly speaking explained on that slide on the left side. So developing national capability, leading some international collaborations, regulating space activities, etc. So that was a big change in the panorama, of course, in the country, and that was, that has created a lot of expectation from many economic activities, from everyone involved in some sort of space activity. Next slide, please. So one of the things that this agency did in the past few years is to work on what they have called roadmaps. And there was one which is about Earth observation. And I was part of the technical advisory group working on this roadmap. So you can go on the website, which is indicated here. You can download these documents and look at what's in there. So you will see it's basically, explaining where the country wants to go in the next decade in terms of developing new missions, in terms of collaboration with foreign entities, etc. Of course, it's a roadmap. Then the next steps are for the government to invest and try to go along that road and hopefully develop a number of these things which have been indicated in the roadmap. Probably not everything which is proposed in this roadmap would exist, but at least it's giving a good frame for a good idea of what is going to happen in this country for developing Earth observation. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah. But actually, there are 7 of these roadmaps. Okay, the one I know more is the one on Earth observation, but there is one on communication technology and services, robotics in space, space situational awareness, position navigation and timing, and access to space. Not all of them have been completed and published, but if you go on the website of the Space Agency, you can find those who have been completed already. Next slide, please. Okay, another thing that the agency has tried to do is to invest in the different states of Australia. As you probably know, Australia is a federation of states. We are here in Western Australia, in Perth, and the Space Agency is across the country. It's a Commonwealth agency. So they have the mandate, in some way, the role to invest in the different states. What they decided to invest in Western Australia is this Australian Space Data Analysis Facility, so ASDAF. So again, the website is here. And here the logic is to help solving, well, not solving, but to help to in one of the very recurrent issue with developing applications from Earth observation, which is to connect the users of these applications, the entities who need applications from Earth observation, with those who have the technical capacity to develop the products, the applications, and the service. So I have seen this for many, many years in that space, that it looks like a relatively obvious thing. Okay, let's bring the academia, research institutes, industry together, and that will work. And all these people will work together and develop a nice application and services. It's actually a very difficult thing to do. You know, the expectations from these different actors are different. They don't have the same economic models, they don't have the same timelines in their activities, not the same expertise. So it's actually requires a very significant effort to bring these people together to really develop applications which are really targeted to the users. And that's what ASDAF is all about. It's a new entity, so they are still trying to figure out exactly how they're going to work. But that's where the industry can be connected to academia and research institution and potential users as well. Next slide, please. Okay, this one is about what is called now Earth Observation Australia. It's to some extent, we could call this an industry body. And that's what is explained here. It's the premier independent national Earth observation community association. So everyone from academia, research institutes, and industry and government can become a member. And this is basically a coordination body and an advocacy body, which is trying to organize the community in Australia, again, to help connecting users and producers of Earth observation. So this group is organizing webinars. There will be this year in August a real face-to-face 3-day workshop. We produce some reports. We have working groups trying to progress a number of questions related to Earth observation. So that's a forum where anyone wanting to have this connection between Earth observation and industry can come and benefit from the connection. Next slide. Okay, the way the Australian government is funding research is in particular through what they call cooperative research centers, so CRCs. The logic is that the government is investing some dollars into this, but that's a very large consortium of, again, universities, research organizations, and industry have to come together and basically to match this investment from government, and then to work on a research program over 5 or 7 years. But the logic is really to develop demand-driven research, user-driven research. It's not about, you know, fundamental blue sky research. It's really about developing things which have some direct impact and application on the economy and on society. So there is one of the CRCs which is really the most relevant to Earth observation, that called the SmartSAT. It was established in 2019, so our university is part of it, like many other in the country. And here you have basically the message from the SmartSAT about what they are. I can read this quickly. So the SmartSAT CRC is a consortium of universities, research organizations, partner with industry, funded by the Australian government to develop know-how, technologies in advanced telecoms, IoT connectivity, intelligent satellite systems, and Earth observation. And the impact of this research will be to develop intellectual property and a specialist industry expertise, blah, 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 etc. So as you see, that's really, again, about developing the space industry, IP around that, and creating jobs at the end. And this is a significant investment. I mean, I don't remember exactly the number, but the combined cash investment from the government and the industry is something like, I think it's more than $30 or $40 million over 7 years. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and well, that's not the next. That's just well, sorry. That was to show the. Yeah, thank you. You know how big the partnership is, of course. So you have, don't need to go to the details, but you have core partners here and supporting partners, and it's a mix of domestic universities, research industry, research organization, industry, international partners as well, startups, etc. Next slide, please. Another of this CRC that is probably relevant for today is the one called the Blue Economy CRC. It was created basically at the same time, I think, that the SmartSAT one, and it's, again, same thing, very large consortium of research and industry working to solve a number of questions in industry. And they span, you know, renewable energy, aquaculture, fisheries, coastal erosions, and all sorts of things like this. Next slide. Okay, this one is another example of how Australia is trying to organize itself to facilitate the use of Earth observation by a number of users. So this is what is called the Copernicus Australasia Regional Data Hub. It's actually an agreement between the Copernicus program, the European Commission, ESA, and UMETSAT, and the and Australia, basically, and the Australian government, which end up with all the Sentinel-1, 2, and 3 data being transferred locally to Australia for this area, which is here indicated on the left side by the purple delineation. And the idea was to allow the Australian users to really use much more efficiently all these products. And I have to say this is a relatively well-designed system and quite a success. And that's where we all go when we need to use these products. They are easily accessible. There are a number of tools developed around that. Well, that's one example where, you know, a number of institutions, space agencies, and industry can come together to facilitate the use of this data set. Next slide. Australia is far, you know, it takes a bit of time for the slides to come. Okay, another very similar example of something that was done in Australia, which is now actually used quite in a large number of countries around the world, which is called well, that was developed by Geosciences Australia. That was initially called the Open Data Cube, and that's now known under this Digital Earth Australia naming or branding. So this one is basically when 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, a bit more than that, the USGS, US Geological Survey, decided to make public the entire archive of the Landsat missions. So Australia decided to take this and to build what they call this data cube, which is basically, you know, a combination of all these data sets in such a way that you can use the data, they are becoming accessible, usable, comparable, and that means users can really take benefit from them and start to develop a number of applications, which was nearly impossible before because this access and the tools around that were not developed. So it's basically a big IT infrastructure with extensive database of remote sensing products and tools to use that. And on the left side is just a copy of their website with a few examples of applications they have started to develop on water observations, coastlines, intertidal elevations, etc. Mangroves, so it's becoming a very powerful product for developing applications. Next slide. And that's going to be nearly the last one. So I wanted to mention this AquaWatch, this Australia AquaWatch mission. If you remember at the beginning, I told you about this Earth observation roadmap, and that's one of the missions which is part of this roadmap. And the goal for this one is to develop a system which will allow to monitor inland water bodies and probably coastal waters as well by combining a space segment. Okay, on this graph you see 2 satellites, but we don't know, maybe that will be just one, maybe that will be more than 2. That's still, of course, in the making. This is just, a very preliminary representation of what it could be. Sorry. And combination of the space segment with a network of in situ sensors, all connected through an IoT network. And that's what is supposed to end up with a monitoring system for the water quality in inland water bodies in Australia. So that's just an example of something which, it's just the early stage of development of this mission. The phase 0 activities were happening last year. So we are just basically starting the phase A activities. So it will take years and years. So maybe this thing will not exist before maybe 2030 or something like this. But there will be a lot of activity along the development of these missions and many opportunities of development. And I think the next one is the real last one. And it's only just to give just a few more details about this AquaWatch mission, which is largely a CSRO mission. So, and what they say here is exactly this. So the goal is safeguarding Australia's freshwater and coastal resources. But the interesting idea is this combination of in situ and satellite systems. And this mission is about Australia, but it should be part of a global network of similar missions that other countries are thinking to develop as well. And I think I am done with the next slide. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for your presentation. That was very interesting to know everything about the sector in Australia. So thank you again for this. I have a lot of questions for you, so I hope you're ready to answer them. But to the participants, please, if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So the first question, I'm going to read them out loud. Is there any cooperation work ongoing with EU entities at Curtin University on maritime topics?
Not that I'm aware of. We had a few activities, but not really related to this with the European Space Agency, because I had connection with them for long. But we don't have really any projects in the application domain, in the application space at the moment with this. We have application activities, but they are purely domestic for the moment. Even if they, of course, rely on products coming from ESA, SmartSAT.
Okay, thank you for this. Can you tell us the main entry points, contact points to reach to do business in the EO sector in Australia?
I was expecting some question like this, and frankly speaking, actually, I cannot really tell. I guess this question is a bit about, how a European entity, a European company can come and do some business in Australia. And that's not a question I can ask. I am not aware of all, I guess, the legal hurdles that people would have to, go through to be able to develop a business here, having subsidiaries or whatever. I'm sorry, but that's not we would need probably another webinar with someone from with the expertise in this. But maybe, the EOA is a good starting point. You can just go on their website, try to connect, ask questions. There are plenty of people in there who can probably help. The CRCs are a way to be connected. It's a bit more difficult after the CRC has been formed. The consortium is existing. They can sometimes, bring new partners in. They would have to consider that they have an interest in doing this, but that's another way maybe to enter into the system for the CRCs.
Okay, thank you for your feedback on this, and I'd like to.
I'm sorry. Yep. Of course, the Space Agency is another point of entry. The Space Agency in Australia is still relatively small structures, because if I would tell people, oh, you can contact the Space Agency, and they have in mind something like the European Space Agency, they might think, well, okay, I'm going to end up on, nowhere. The Australian Space Agency is still a small structure. So you can, if you get there, you can probably relatively quickly end up having the contact with the appropriate people.
Okay, thank you, David. And I see the opportunity of this question also to tell you that the ConnectEO and Space2Wave Consortium are here to help you if you need any contacts in Australia. So feel free to contact us as well. So another question, since the Australian Space Agency focuses on creating jobs, other research can be funded in the space sector. And do you think the ASA will open its focus and fund research in the coming years?
That's the question we ask ourselves, of course, because we definitely would prefer that the Space Agency has as well a science program. We just don't know. And we have elections as well coming relatively soon in Australia, so we don't know what the next government is going to be. So I can't really answer, but of course that would be, at least in the research community, of course, that's what we would expect. But we don't know if this is going to happen any soon. So for the developing, research, we have to go through other source of funding. So the CRCs are one example. We still have the Australian Research Council, which is really more about fundamental research, a bit of applied research as well, but they don't have any specific line of funding attached to space or Earth observatory. It's a generic research funding, and you have to go there and compete with everything else.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Do you think the Association of Earth Observation Australia will be interested in starting some partnerships with EU SMEs?
It depends on what partnership means in the question, because I think EOA is open to have members from overseas. I don't want to say something wrong, but I think that's definitely something feasible. But as I said, EOA it's essentially a forum for discussions, coordination, and advocacy. There is no funding or anything like this through EOA. But again, EOA is a very approachable entity. So just go on the website, send emails, ask the questions, and you can relatively quickly be connected to this.
Okay, thank you for this. And the next question is, how could EU SMEs engage partnerships with research center, or universities, maybe with the Smart CRC?
That's an option, but as I said to the previous questions, the CRCs, there was a process to become a member of a CRC after the CRC has been formed initially. I'm not exactly sure what the process is, so we could try to get a bit more details on this, but CRCs are indeed an option. You don't necessarily as well need to be a partner of the CRC to be involved in a project funded by the CRC. So that's and actually what is making things a bit more complicated actually is every CRC may have a slightly different way of functioning. They are relatively independent entities. They actually function a bit like a company, and each of them may have a slightly different organization and strategy and way of connecting with new industry partners.
Okay, thank you for this answer. The next question, do you think the maritime application domains in Australia have an interest potential for EU SMEs, or Australian SMEs cover already the needs of that market? That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you something from my experience. I moved to Australia a bit more than 8 years ago. Of course, I didn't move here to develop an economic activity. I moved here as a researcher in a university. I had already good connections, overseas and in the country. But I can tell you, it's kind of it's a long process to get in and to understand how the country works, how the economy works, how the people work, the context and everything. So I can imagine that someone moving or trying to start a business here coming from Europe would probably face, similar sort of challenges in terms of, moving into the system and being able to develop a significant activity. So yeah, that's what I can say. I don't have the other experience to share about this. I'm not sure if that was actually the question. I don't think that the market for this kind of development is already full. So there are probably definitely opportunities to try to come and develop stuff. Australia is a very large country by the geography. It's a continent, but it's still a small country in terms of population and capability. Even if, in terms of research, for instance, Australia is doing way better than many other countries. If you, look at the ratio of the research produced per capita. But still, there is many skills that we need in the country, many things we still need. Many people come actually in this country to bring the skills that the country doesn't have. So I think there are definitely opportunities for overseas entities to come here and develop businesses.
Thank you for your feedback on this. And I have one last question. So in one of the first slides, 2 case studies were presented. One of them was about sargassum algae and the use of real-time Copernicus data. What kind of data are used, and what sensors from the Copernicus program are available in real time? So I don't know, Juliana, if you can put the slide just so that everyone knows.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure for the 2 examples I showed today. I'm not exactly sure what sort of data they use. I think for the sargassum, it's a combination of visible observation like Sentinel-3 or Sentinel-2, and radar observation from the SAR, so from Sentinel-1. But they use models as well to combine everything. The one on the right side about the wind and wave energy system, I'm not sure. It's probably again SAR, because I'm pretty sure they look at the wave and the wind, so that's probably what it is. But there are, if you go on the Copernicus website, you would see there is, the number of products that they deliver is becoming really, really quite incredible. Sometimes when I give lectures to students who don't know much about Earth observation, I start with a slide with probably 40 different parameters, and I just ask them to look at this and tell me which one they think cannot be, of course, observed from space. And of course, the game is that all of these parameters can be observed from space. There is such a large range of things we can quantify and map from space. It's just becoming really, really extremely powerful.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I've asked you all the questions. I don't know if you want to add something to conclude, something you want to emphasize on.
No, I think I hope that was useful for today. We'll see. I have some experience of having worked with SMEs and larger companies in the past in Europe. So I know that, I think actually European entities, SMEs and larger companies are actually way more advanced in developing this kind of stuff than we are here in Australia. So I think there is definitely room for improvement and room for developing partnerships and new activities.
Okay, thank you very much, David, again for your presentation and your time today. And thank you to all participants for your time and question. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, you will find the recording of the session on our website and also on the Space2A website. And feel free to contact us if you have more questions or if you require more information. I wish you all a nice day. Bye.